Good evening, and welcome to our discussion on the future of higher education. I'm Carrie Wabel, and I am thrilled to be joined by Mix founder and CEO Abby Brody and Mix Director of Education Design, Dr. Jules Coleman. Abby spent her career in K-12 classrooms and administration before moving into the higher education space to address the gaps between higher ed and real life. Jules has a storied career in higher education, previously serving as the Wesley Newcomb Holfeld Professor of Jurisprudence and Professor of Philosophy at Yale Law School, and most recently serving as NYU's Senior Vice Provost for Academic Planning. Together with a team of educators and experience seekers at Mix, they are rewriting the future of higher education. So, welcome, and let's dive in.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
I want to start with jobs and career readiness, which is the #1 reason students pursue a higher education. Studies show that 96% of chief academic officers say that their graduates are ready for the workforce, but only 11% of hiring managers agree. That's a pretty stark contrast. Jules, what is higher education doing to address this?
Well, actually, a lot less than we would hope that they would do. So the most straightforward problem seems to be the following. After securing a college degree and getting a job, most industry leaders report that they have to train the students who recent graduates for another 12 to 18 months before they're ready to take the entry-level job that they were hired for. This has had two extraordinarily detrimental effects. One, it suppressed the salaries at which people would enter because of the high investment that industries have had to place in re-educating or continually educating the college graduates that they hire. And second, it has increased dramatically the search costs and the turnover costs associated with entry-level hires, because it's only after 18 months that the industry in question has realized that the persons that they have hired, or a certain percentage of them, are actually not competent for the work, and they have to go about and do it again. So there's obviously a gap between what people are prepared to do in virtue of having a degree and what they need in order to be employment ready.
This is crazy to me. That investment of time and money after all the time and money spent on higher education. Abby, what are some of the alternatives that are cropping up? I mean, I know obviously we're all part of one, but I just want to talk broad spectrum. Like, what's out there?
Yeah. Just because exactly what Dr. Coleman was speaking about, that there is this delta between work ready and education, and they're not speaking to each other. You know, as you said, parents and students are expecting to be work ready and have some value at the end, and the employers are not seeing that value. And there's a huge disconnect. What we're seeing are a few things. One, we're seeing parents and students taking themselves out of that, looking for alternatives, right? 86% of parents are looking for a college alternative right now. They are concerned about the long-term investment, if this is the right path for their students. And I can go on later as to why they should be concerned about that. And I empower those students with those parents with that conversation. But the second place is the private sector has had enough. And they're saying, wait, we know what we need. Why don't we get into the field of education and help bring in employable, skillful labor? So you've seen that with Google, right? Google has launched over 7 certifications now that are at a fraction, a 10th, maybe a 20th actually, of the cost of these online degree programs. And then they walk out job ready. This is just the beginning. So the certification movement is rising and will continue to rise over the next decade.
But let's dig into that for a second, because that sounds great, right? Sounds great to me. I know what I want to do. I'm going to go and get a certification. I'm going to go to work. But as much as people are starting to say maybe traditional college is not the safe bet, there also has to be a lot of fear attached to the other side, no? Because we don't have any necessarily proof of it yet. Talk to me a little bit about what you're hearing from parents and students on that.
So we have to remember that there should be fear on both sides. Okay, the known. Let's talk about what we know. We know a lot about the results of higher education. Only 14% of students who walk into the traditional college, I'm talking about college here, experience, will be successfully served. What does success mean? Well, one, graduating. People forget, but 50% of students who walk in, 70 of which will take on student debt, never graduate. And we're all educators. 50% is an F. We fail our own metrics. And of those that do graduate, half of them will be completely underwater because the cost of their degree is more than its market value, which feels just criminal to me personally as an educator. And then what we also know is that 73% of those who do graduate won't even use their degree of study. So there should be fear on both sides. I understand that this feels different and new, but I, as an educator, have never been more hopeful. And I hope parent and student, you should feel hopeful too. The value proposition has been broken for many students in the traditional way. There is alternatives out there. We are finally seeing education change to meet the needs of today and tomorrow, and we should be embracing that.
Well, clearly. And I think what's interesting about that is that there's all of these different pathways. That's really the optimism, right? So Jules, I mean, you've spent your entire career in this space and you know so much about it. What do you think about what's going on right now? How do you think that compares, the learning process and everything that's happening?
Well, it's kind of distressing in a way, but it's taken a long time for people to become aware of the situation. And one of the reasons why it's taken so long is because historically colleges and universities have had a veritable monopoly over accreditation for job readiness. So, which is to say, if you're in the HR department of any firm or any company, you will never go wrong hiring a college graduate. The better the school, the more likely you are to maintain your job. The better the placement in terms of where in the graduating class the person was, the more likely you are to succeed. It's like the old adage, no one has ever gotten fired for hiring McKinsey as their consultant. You're never going to get fired. So as long as colleges had this veritable monopoly over accreditation, they were sluggish to respond to facts on the ground. And it's only when facts on the ground became pretty well known, when, for example, parents started to realize that the value proposition and that colleges began to talk in terms of a value proposition, that the debate was opened up. So facts don't emerge until a debate or a discussion or an investigation begins to take place. And that took a very long time to happen. And the net effect has been something of an erosion of the monopoly that colleges have had on two ends. One, by offering alternatives to college, direct accreditation programs, and industry-driven and industry-created certification programs that make you job ready as replacements for college. So little by little by little, there's been erosion, and erosion will stimulate colleges to be more responsive than they have been to this point, but they're not well suited to change quickly. So they won't be first movers. They're not first movers. The first movers are already out there and in play. And the thing I would say to parents is the thing that they're nervous about can be reduced. Their anxiety can be reduced by gathering additional information. That is, there's a lot more going on that they're just not aware of. The high school, college counselors are not informing them about the opportunities. So there are very few avenues that people know places to look, places to get confidence about where they look and what they are learning. And that is our responsibility. All of us who love higher education and want students to gather the skills that they need to move forward, want to be in the position of helping people learn about what the alternatives are.
It makes sense. And you know what you're saying is all of this has been happening. The erosion has been slowly happening. The alternatives have been slowly happening. From where I sit, without a background in higher education or education at all, other than my own, it feels like it's only happening right now. And I think that's the stress that parents and students are taking on because their eyes are just opening to this, right? And it's a lot of information. It's a lot of information. It's a huge break from the norm. And I think that, you know, there needs to be, as adults, we all understand these things, right? We understand what education really gave us. We understand what that time in our life really gave us. But we're still a little bit scared to say, don't go that path, right? Abby, I want you to talk to us a little bit more about that because you talk to these parents and students every day.
And one thing I think every parent and student should be aware of, and this is what I've spent most of my time studying, is the actual return on investment of higher education. Like, we understand what they want out of it, but what do they actually get? Those that do succeed. The longest return on investment has nothing to do with the classroom. It doesn't have to do with what you study, because we know that 73% of students don't even use that degree of study. And 41% of those graduates don't even go into a vocation that requires a college degree. It has to do with something that no one gives any time or credit to: the experience. Getting out there in the world, finding your passion, learning about yourself, getting to live on your own without your parents, doing your laundry. These things have value. And when we get stuck into higher education and the needs and all the pressure parents and students are feeling, and they're so concentrated on name brands and what it means, you should spend 90% of your time thinking about what the experience is. Who are you going to meet? What types of people? What are the networking opportunities at this school? Will you get real life experience in your college? How are you going to set yourself up from the pack? If the degree is slowly eroding, right, the value of it to the employer, what will make you stand out? So we have spent a lot of time talking to Fortune 500 companies and talking about what is the future for them, what are they looking for, and what is the future CD, which Mix is helping to create. And we do not think a piece of paper is going to be enough in the future. That's not what they're looking for, okay?
It hasn't been for a long time. We all know that, right? Once you're in the real world, that's not really, it's an entry point. So maybe that's what we're looking at, new entry points.
Yeah, can I just add briefly to that? So today I was speaking with a person from the industry of 3D in all areas: 3D medicine, 3D architecture, 3D 3D printing, whatever. Basically, an expert in the field of 3D across all disciplines. And I asked this person, what is it that you look for? This is one of the people who's creating their own, let's call it, certificate program or employment ready program. And he said, in my industry and all the industries that hire people from me, they've stopped looking at transcripts. Their interview consists in stopping the person from talking and putting a problem in front of them and asking them to do it. Sometimes it's as simple as put together a web page for me. Sometimes it's as simple as do a little bit of coding. Other times it's something like, if someone is looking for an architecture position, and they'll put a project in front of them and say, what height should the buildings be? Tell me how wide and high the building should be, or how much space should be between them. You have an hour and a half. Show me how you work. Mm-hmm. Show me how you respond. Show me how you think, how you respond to challenge, even how you respond to the fact that I stopped the interview and I ask you this question right now. Right? And there's much, much more of that sort of, especially with the work of the future that people will be facing. It's a lot less tradition based. It's a lot less pedigree oriented. It's much more oriented on what can you do? Show me your stuff. And
add on to that.
Yeah. And when you present yourself, what you're presenting is yourself and what you can do.
Yeah, Abby, go ahead. We had a small delay. Go ahead.
In the talks that we have been having with parents and employers, everyone needs to be aware of this incredible factoid. We're going into a space in our evolution of the workforce where AI and the singularity are going to hit together. It's going to rapidly change so fast. The class of 2021, we expect to have 11 distinct jobs before they turn 50. Now, I know that I've been lucky enough to be an educator my whole life. I've not had 11 distinct jobs. How do we prepare students for the inevitability of having to change so many jobs, many of which we don't know? We have to focus on those foundational skills, the things that go across all sectors: critical thinking, communication. The number one thing employers say is they are looking for is a team player. Higher education isn't that, the traditional classroom is based in theory of content. It does not talk about those skills or apply them. And because of this, we know that the whole premise that we promise kids, do all this schooling, put down hundreds of thousands of dollars, school, and then you can live life. We know that's an obsolete model, and that higher education has to change. There is no way a student graduating today will have a one-stop shop in education be done. They'll have to need reskilling and retooling for the 11 distinct jobs they have. So I believe the future of education will be not only dynamic, where students are creating choice based on what they need at that moment, but be dynamic in time. I think students will not be doing a full 4 years as we go down. Stanford's 2025 plan is a great example of a flexible ecosystem. Mix also has a flexible ecosystem to meet that demand. But we need to make sure that the skills, those foundational skills, are being taught. And I would argue the only way to learn those foundational skills is not sitting in a content lecture class, it's through doing.
Of course. That's when you learn. If you were lucky enough, and I'm talking about maybe my education or maybe both of yours, if you were lucky enough to have that one class, that one professor, that one internship, that one study abroad experience, that one thing that opened up your eyes, then you were lucky, because all of a sudden you had more experience to put into where you were going, right? But it doesn't seem to me that most educational programs are intentional about putting all of those experiences into your pocket so that you can use them, right? It's like seeking them is great. We should all be hungry and seeking experiences. But I think that there's some like luck attached to some of it if you did the right thing or met the right person, right? Talk to me a little bit about that, Jules. You speak a lot about this, about the intention of how education is really supposed to be designed for us as humans.
Okay, well, I'll tell a story of my own past, which is so long ago I might misremember. But in any case, when I was in college, I was at Brooklyn College as an undergraduate, and I was in the Scholars Program, which was, for people who had done well before they went to college. But in any case, when I applied to graduate school, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had literally no idea what I was prepared for. So I applied to graduate school in physics, graduate school in philosophy, law school, and medical school. And that is a pretty varied, but I knew one thing. In order for me to find a career, I had to get more schooling, right? Because I hadn't been prepared for anything at that point. It was completely unintentional that the reason I went on first for a PhD in philosophy was because I got a full fellowship to go. I mean, it's that accidental. It's that accidental. And the attention so if we just look at regular universities, online universities, and what other people are doing now, regular universities do have a lot of peer-to-peer experience. You live in dorms, you join fraternities or sororities or whatever, you engage in after-school activities or once around, but it's not mindful and it's not by design. It's not intentional. That is, it's very haphazard, and it's just there. It's a collateral benefit. It's not part of the design of the school education program. If you look at the online, what online is doing is delivering the content of the regular school, regular brick and mortar colleges, and not doing anything on the interpersonal side of it or the experiential side of it. That's how they keep prices down. So what most people are doing now in the new space, and what we take ourselves to be doing, is what colleges do unintentionally and online universities can't do at all. We do mindfully and by design, by integrating the education with the experience in a holistic fashion, designed primarily to make students ready for employment and ready for life.
It makes sense. So then I think it goes back to, if that's something that I'm interested in, I want to try any of the number of new things that are out on the market. How do I start to organize that as a student? How do I figure out, what do I want? What am I supposed to be doing? I mean, we all know you suffer through those kinds of questions for many years of your life at times. So how does that purpose play into it?
I would start by saying, it is 100% okay to not have any idea what you want to do. You're 17. Your life has been school, after school, homework, repeat. There has been no opportunity, and K-12 is not designed in this way, and that's a whole nother discussion if it should be, but let's work with what we have. It's not designed to teach you what a public policy degree is and why you should major in and what that means even. It's not designed to allow you to find out your strengths and weaknesses. It is designed for you to get through these obstacles and show mastery in content. That's its design. So the first thing I want to say to parents and students, it is okay. And And it should be. You should not know. This is a time for exploration. And unfortunately, that is not what higher education is about in the traditional sense of college as we know it. There is no place for exploration of anything. We're seeing how that's blowing back. Students start finding a major. For example, I went to a college. I had thought I wanted to be an African American history major, went to the top school for that, went abroad, found myself, found my purpose, traveled around the world and learned who I am. And often you have to be outside your boundaries to have that experience. I always say you have to be lost before you're found. And then I went back to my school and I had no education major, none, right? So here I am at a school that doesn't even serve my purpose. And I think that's what's wrong about just educational philosophy. We know how people learn. We know that school, it should not be school versus life. It's school and life. Your purpose should drive your educational choices. Your educational choices should drive your purpose. Right now, they're disconnected. But again, there's so much good happening. So parents and students, while you're looking out there to find, and I don't know if you want to get into this, Carrie, but this is not a happy thing, and this scares a lot of parents. But you should be aware of it. We estimate about 50% of higher education institutions to close in the next decade. And as you're applying, you might be thinking, is my school for my child even going to be there in 2 years?
I was literally going to go there next, because I want to say that, the moment I spoke about earlier, it feels like this is just happening because, of course, the pandemic accelerated a lot of this conversation. And now everyone has been together. If you're already in school, you may be taking your classes online next to your family in a crowded room trying to get through all this. So all of a sudden, the conversations moved much more quickly, right? Mm-hmm. So to those people who are in this right now, I don't know if I should even go to school. I don't know if I should try something else. I don't know if I should just maybe stay online. Like, this moment is a moment. And there's a lot of uncertainty facing higher education as an industry, I would say. But that's not for me to say. Jules, I'll let you talk about it. You know it far better than me.
Well, I would say that in the United States, there are 4,000 colleges and universities. Virtually all of them employ the same business model. That model actually applies successfully and is appropriate for maybe 200 of them. That's a slight exaggeration, but it's certainly the case that a lot of colleges are in financial trouble for a variety of reasons. They're very heavily invested in their buildings. They're very heavily invested in faculty and administration. Every university and every college repeats the same back office, the same administrative services of the college that's 5 miles down the road. And there's very little in the area of mergers and acquisitions among colleges. It's just not one of those sectors of the economy in which people seek efficiencies by joining forces with one another. So everyone in the college higher education industry, the traditional higher education industry, is really an independent actor and has very little in the way of cooperation with others by the way of sharing services and so on. Much like where I live outside of New Haven, Connecticut, in which the town of East Haven and North Haven and Hamden are all separated by about 5 minutes, and they repeat one another's services. So the financial costs are extraordinarily high, and the value proposition is now finally and fully under review by parents and children alike. But the message I would want to get across above all others is when you're going to live to be 80 years old on average, right?
Hopefully.
It's okay.
We're well,
I'm sorry. Yes, exactly. Many people who are on this call are going to live to be over 100. Okay, fine. I'm settling for 80 something. Okay, at this point. Having said that, it's okay not to know what the next 60 years are going to look like. In fact, any guess you made is what the next 60 years is going to look like is certainly wrong. So what you have to prepare for is to prepare yourself for a life in which there's going to be a degree of uncertainty that you can attack and take advantage of rather than be frightened and anxious about for your whole life. So take time, try a few things. We're in a period in which parents in cities like New York fret forever from the moment the child leaves the hospital upon birth to what pre-K they're going to get into, so they can figure out what K through 12 they're going to get into, so they can figure out what college and what law school or medical school they're going to get into. And none of that is going to be of any relevance 15 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, right? What's going to be relevant is, do you know how to learn? Do you know how to think? Do you know how to seize opportunities when they emerge? Do you know how to distinguish noise from genuine information? Can you be a learner and a teacher of yourself? Can you be an entrepreneur? And by that, I don't mean a business person. I mean a person who is creating themselves and constantly adding value. And you can't add value to others until you learn how to value yourself. So if you can't keep getting banged around like a ping pong ball from one thing or another in the search of pedigree and successes, the thing I always said, my wife and I always said was, we want our children to be, we are parenting for our children at the age of 40, not so they can be valedictorian of their high school.
That's a pretty beautiful thing, because it's true, and I think that's, to me, the most exciting thing about what I see happening in this space right now is that the path was always so set, and in a way that Jules has just been discussing, it never really focused on the person, didn't focus on the student. It wasn't like, what do I want? What do I maybe want to pursue? What do I want to think about? How can I figure this out? It was like, do this, stay on this track, right? Abby, I want you to talk a little bit about that, because it's an important piece, that personalization piece, that piece that speaks to the student and what they really want.
From my conversations with students is that, and I have to tell you, I'm blown away by Gen Z. They give me such hope. This is the most rockin' generation, and they're going to push all this forward, okay? So if you're a Gen Z out there, thank you. Thank you for changing education. They want, this is a generation that personalizes their sneakers, right? They doodle on them. It's all about identity and purpose, and they are very much about changing and solving the world's problems. Amen. They should apply that to their education as well, that exact thing. And they have the possibilities now. You are the generation, unlike any other generation, that doesn't have to be a freshman, right? If you're a freshman, you have to take this many credits at this many credits at that. A lot of students that I'm talking to don't understand the why. Why? I'm really passionate about the arts. Why am I spending thousands of dollars getting credits in something that I don't see the purpose or reason, and I can't apply it, and nor will I ever? Looking back at my own college degree, I took classes that were meaningless because I wanted to get my GPA up, and I needed to fulfill some credit. No meaning to me.
Yeah, and that's what I think is exciting, is really putting the two things together. It's taking the student and the education, and to me, from everything you're saying, putting them more together.
Let me just add how you do that is now we have to embrace the online revolution. Now, K-12 parent, I know you're like recoiling, and I get it. I'm a K-12 parent too. Online has been tough, okay? That is not the same in higher education, okay? We know that 70% of students that were disrupted and pushed online due to COVID had increased learning outcomes and preferred it. They felt the learning quality was better. They were able to go at their own speed. They could pause, they could ask for resources. And while this might be disturbing to some, this generation does not pick up the phone, nor do they raise their hand. They chat. Online learning gives access and quality of instruction, because you too can go to Harvard now, right? I mean, it's very powerful. You can curate from the best of not just the United States, but the world is at your fingertips. And you can truly find the education you need to meet your needs right now. And that is empowering and exciting. And as a hiring manager, if I had two kids sitting next to me, one who had, the standard degree from a university, and then next to me, someone who has gotten certifications and had the marketing course from Wharton, took the ethics and data analysis from University of Sydney, and could show me 6 actual working products they've had, I can tell you.
There's no contest. Yeah, nope. Absolutely.
Well,
so we only have a few minutes left. Oh, go ahead, Jules.
So
I was just going to go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to add to it a perspective for people that would be helpful for them when they think about where they're at and the anxiety that they might be feeling. So most of schooling that we're familiar with is based on the idea of education as a form of teaching. You can see this in the architecture of the buildings or the classroom. Have a wall, which is a blackboard or a whiteboard or something like that. Then you have the teacher in front of it, and then you have the students sitting passively in rows of seats. And that is, you perfect the art of teaching the information that only the teacher has access to the students. And most buildings reflect that. Now we've learned a lot more in the recent past about how people learn. And what you're feeling now is that there is an undercurrent in which people are concerned with the education of their children reflecting the learning, what we know about how people learn, rather than about how people teach. And the vast majority of the educational institutions that we know are very heavily invested physically and financially in the teaching model of education, not in the learning model of education. And when you look around, you'll find that the alternatives and the initiatives that are being undertaken, the things you want to learn about, are virtually all built around the idea of your son or daughter as a learner. How do they learn? How do they process information? How do they put it together? How do they access it? How do they form hypotheses out of it? How do they take the information they have and draw inferences, hypotheses that they test? How do they move forward in the world? This is education in which the student is the leading agent, not the primary recipient. And that's the suitable model, because for the rest of their lives, you don't want the rest of their life to be something that happens to them. You want the rest of their life to be something that they help shape and own. And
It's
that
absolutely
it
right.
should be reflected in the mechanisms of learning. And that's what all the alternatives are focusing on now. Learning, 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 not the skill of teaching, teaching, teaching.
That's excellent. And I think that it's, the student-led piece of this is a really exciting thing. So I'm just going to wrap up by saying, Abby, do you have any advice for that student, that parent, both of you? What's your advice to this parent and student who right now has a world of possibilities, but is like,
Yeah. Well, for the student, one, you got this. I just want to say that first off, you have this. There are options for you. And you should be excited about it. It's overwhelming. Not going to lie. You are in the midst of the rewrite of higher education. But ready? It's been rewritten for a reason. It wasn't working. So come build it with us. Come and think about what you want out of your education and get the return on investment. Because tuition keeps rising, wages remain stagnant. Okay, this is not something that you want to put a lot of money in without knowing your why. Find your why. That might be through a gap program, or that might be by taking some classes and dabbling and doing them online, by the way. There's nothing wrong with taking an online degree. It's cheaper, it's faster, and it allows you to do your education anywhere. And that is pretty exciting. We never had that opportunity. I would have loved to have done my education in some sunny place where I felt culturally inspired and where I could dive in. But, most college campuses are quads. You're quadded in the middle of nowhere. And all your real exposure are other students who also have no idea what they want. So if you can get out there in the world and listen and meet people and hear narratives, because that's what learning is. It's just one long story. But narratives have meaning when they have context, and being out there in the world is the context you need.
It's so true. And we're learning every day. And we know that really education is now learning too, right? So we're pumped about it. We are going to have so many more of these talks. So we can definitely, pause here. And if any of you watching have any topics that you want to hear from Abby and Jules about higher education and what's going on and all of those changes, Of course, keep leaving them in the comments, or you can visit us and on our Learn More page and book a session. You know, they're doing sessions all day, every day with parents and students and talking about this to really, really help people figure it out. So we hope to see you soon. And thank you all. Thank you so much, Abby and Jules, especially. Thank you. Okay.
Oh, it's our
Bye-bye.
pleasure. Bye now.